He said, and I want you to join my leadership team to head up the point of care business across the UK and Ireland. And that was a massive promotion and something that I would never, ever have applied for in a million years. I was terrified of presenting. There was no way I could have stood up at a sales meeting and spoken to 300 people, which is what I knew I would have had to have done in that job. So it wasn't even on my agenda. And when he said it, I couldn't believe it. And the beauty of somebody believing in you before you believe in yourself is so important. And that's what happened to me.
Welcome to Your Digital Reputation. Here's your host, Roger Christie.
Hello, I'm Roger Christie, founder and principal at Reputation Advisory Propel, and host of the Your Digital Reputation podcast, where we talk to industry leaders about how trust is built, tested and scaled in a digital world. Thanks again for joining me. This season we've been exploring a shift from visibility to belief. The idea that the risk of not being believed is now greater than the risk of not being seen. And within this context, it's what's come to be called authentic leadership. Is that a commercial asset or a threat to senior executives today? My guest for this episode is Allison Rossiter, seasoned healthcare executive, having held the top jobs at Roche, Genetic Signatures, and most recently Novartis. And she's the perfect person to have this conversation with, as someone who calls herself courageously authentic. But really, what that means is she's a leader and human who has ultimately just been herself, even in the highly regulated and seemingly constrained world of healthcare. And as an executive who has led major businesses through growth and transformation, Ali shares her honest reflections on whether being herself, being honest, engaging, fun, funny, wrong, and real has been a source of risk worth avoiding, or if it has in fact been the cause of belief, empowerment, and performance that all leaders crave in a commercial setting. She has plenty of wisdom to share, so let's bring her in now. So Ali, can you share a bit about your background, about your senior roles in pharmaceuticals and diagnostics? How did you get to where you've ended up?
I got to where I ended up through somebody recognising something in me that I didn't even realise I had. And it started back in the UK. I worked for a company called Roche, a Swiss pharmaceutical and diagnostic organisation. And I joined them when I was one of my first jobs out of university. And then I'd been part of the organisation in the UK. I was there actually for 12 years in the UK before I moved overseas. But as part of that, I was come back from maternity leave. I was doing my job. I was a manager of a group of people. And I was in the office helping with a new CRM system. And I got a tap on the shoulder. The managing director would like to see you in his office. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. Like, what have I done? Have I committed fraud in my expenses or something? And I went up the stairs, and it's up 2 lots of stairs in an open atrium. And I was looking down at my feet. The heart was pounding. And I get to his office, and he's a tall Dutch guy. You know, and I'm not a very tall person. So I look up at him, and he said, Ali, take a seat. Yeah, so I'm like shaking. And he said, I admire what you do. I've been watching you and I love your attitude. I love the way you do it. I love your energy. He said, and I want you to join my leadership team to head up the point of care business across the UK and Ireland. And that was a massive promotion and something that I would never, ever have applied for in a million years. I was terrified of presenting. There was no way I could have stood up at a sales meeting and spoken to 300 people, which is what I knew I would have had to have done in that job. And so it wasn't even on my agenda. And when he said it, I couldn't believe it. And the beauty of somebody believing in you before you believe in yourself is so important. And that's what happened to me. And so that was the start of my senior career. And we changed care for patients across the UK and Ireland through having drive and passion. And then my career kind of stood up on its own in that a colleague who was in Canada then called me and said, Ali, we're going through a transformation. Do you want to come and be our executive director of sales across Canada? So I flew out to Canada with my family and, of course, went through the interview process, but ended up getting the job, moved out to Canada. And then very similar thing happened. The head of the US said, hey, I've put you in touch with the head of one of our global teams. Think you'd be great. Then I moved to California. And then Australia, well, it's quite a different story for Australia. I wasn't offered the role. So I saw the vacancy. I'd been in California for 2 years, almost to the day. And the chance to be the managing director for Roche Diagnostics in Australia came up. And I thought, I would love that job. So I called the head of Asia, who was recruiting for the role, and I expressed my interest. And he said, well, that's great. He said, but we consider Australia a medium-sized country, and really you don't have any country experience, even though I'd done all these other roles. I'd led a product globally, done all these exciting things. He said, so maybe go for a smaller country, like Hong Kong, Singapore, something like that. And I said, yeah, okay, thank you. And I put the phone down, and I thought to myself, I don't want that. I want Australia. So a few days later, I called him back and I said, look, you don't have to give me the job, but please just give me the interview. So at least I can get the experience of what an interview at this level is like. And so he agreed. He interviewed me, and the head of HR for Asia interviewed me. And he called me back maybe a week later and said, Ali, do you want to move to Sydney? I'm like, I was over the moon. I was so excited.
What I hear through that, Ali, and what's interesting, I don't know how you reflect on this. In the early stages of your career, there was obviously a lot of belief in your ability, and people saw leadership qualities that perhaps you didn't yet see yourself. But then that transition to Australia, it sounds like that belief was very present, that self-belief and conviction to say, well, no, this is an opportunity I want to go after. So obviously something at some point clicked. Yeah, and you saw things differently. In your eyes, what makes a great leader, or what makes great leadership?
I think actually comes back to the Australian motto of everybody deserves a fair go, right? And I think people have skills and abilities that they don't always know they have. Like me back in the UK all those years ago, I was terrified of presenting. I couldn't have done a podcast. If you'd have paid me $1 million, I couldn't have done it. And somebody saw something in me that when they shared that belief with me and they gave me the opportunity and helped me, the guy at the time got me a coach to help me with public speaking, it changed my life. And so I think that's great leadership, getting the rough diamonds and polishing them. And then that's your legacy. When you've polished these rough diamonds and they're all sparkling and they're making the next diamond sparkle, that for me is great leadership. Believing in people, not having everyone in this cookie cutter mode of what a picture of a great leader should be. I think leadership changes over time as well. If you think about 1950s leadership or leadership of years gone by, it was very much command and control. And now I think it's more around authenticity and being a true leader and a human. Some of us have children, some of us have pets. The pet might pass away. For that person, it's like their baby. So we have to think about that and give them the time they need. The same if somebody's child was sick, you'd give them the time they needed. And being empathetic, being strong, just because you're empathetic doesn't make you a weak leader. It makes you actually a stronger leader, because then people will be in your team and want to work for you because they see you value them, and they see that they feel engaged and they want to work for you. And I think it's a very different story than just whipping somebody to get them to do what you want them to do. And I think that's how leadership has changed over the years. And what I consider good leadership is sometimes you've got to be tough, right? You've got to be cruel to be kind. You've got to give the tough feedback, but you do it in a way that makes people feel valued as well.
Yes, absolutely. Leadership has changed and will continue to change based on the context around leaders. How do you role model that? How has your leadership style changed over the years? When
I first became a people leader, I remember it vividly actually. And I'd come back from maternity leave, so I must have been 30. A lot of my team were older than me, and I felt like a fraud. I'm like some of the people were the same age as my parents. And I felt guilty, like I'm going to say bossing, because I felt like I was the boss, right? And I was bossy. I was a little bossy boots, because I thought that's what managers, leaders, even the name, we weren't called a leader, you were called a manager. You were managing them, or you were bossing them. Who's the boss, right? And over time, that word seems to have gone away, and now it's leader. Leaders are followed. Bosses and managers are kind of, you drag them along with you. And I think that's changed. And I've got more confident and comfortable in myself. And it's also experience as well. At the beginning, you don't really know what you're doing. You've never done it before. In fact, I met a guy at the weekend, and he's young in his career. And in his previous role, he was given a team. And he said, I didn't know what to do. So I read a book. And the book told him to, I don't know, I'm assuming boss them around in some way, because he said, I felt really, looking back on it, I feel really bad for what I did and how I acted because I didn't know any better. And I think the other thing that's helped me as a leader and changed my leadership is being a parent. You know, you can boss your kids about all you want, but they'll only do what they, especially when they're babies, they'll only do what they're going to do. And so you've got to then find different ways. It might be kisses and cuddles rather than sitting on the naughty step, or however you decide to parent your children. So I think it's that too. It's just being a human and being flexible and not being so rigid that it's got to be this way and that way, because humans aren't like that. Humans aren't robots. Humans have emotions, humans have baggage, humans have things going on, and they'll act accordingly.
Humans aren't perfect.
No.
You've mentioned that word authentic, though, and authenticity, and that's a character trait of leadership today. I've heard you described as courageously authentic, and I think they may have even been your words describing yourself. I think authenticity gets a bit of a bad rap. I think that it's a loaded and misunderstood terms at time. What does being courageously authentic mean for you in the context of leaders? And have you always been yourself around others?
Well, to answer your second question first, yes, I am who I am. And I used to find it strange when I was a member of the leadership team in one of the countries I was in, and some of the men, like big, tall, 6 foot odd men, big strapping guys. And they'd say, oh, I'm not like this at home. My wife rules the roost. My wife's like 5 foot and she's in charge. And I found it really strange. And I thought, so why are you like that here? Why are you all bossy boots here? Yeah, at home, you're like a mouse. I didn't understand that, because with me, what you see is what you get. I'm talking to yourself. I'm talking to the kids. I'm talking to Albo. I will be the same person. That's the only person I know is me, who I am. Yes, I've changed over the years, but that's just through growing up and through experience and things like that. But when you ask about authenticity and courageous authenticity, for me, it boils down to values. My values are really, really important to me, and I will not compromise them for anyone. And I think the older I get, the more confident you become the older you get. That's just natural, because experience comes one day at a time. What you know at 20 is not what you know at 50. And that's just a fact of life. And so it gives you more confidence to really live your values. And my values, my biggest one is integrity. I do think I turn up every day and I do my role or my roles in the past with the best of intention, because I think I'm doing the right thing. Doesn't mean I'm always right. I will screw it up now and then. But then it's about putting your hand up and going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. My intention was X and it happened to be Y. Because as we've just said, we're all humans and we make mistakes. So we just can't help it. That's what people do. So integrity is so important to me. I can't tell lies. I just can't do it. I would be awake all night if I told lies. And sometimes that's at my detriment. I'm so honest. And I think it's a Northern English trait as well. I'm from the north of England and, I say what I like and I like what I say. That's kind of the motto of the Northern English people, I think. And yeah, integrity, courage, being bold and brave enough to stand up and say, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry, and walk away. And I've done that in my life as well. And that's okay. And actually people who I've spoken to about things like that have said, like, good on you. Because that takes courage and that takes guts to do things like that.
What I find interesting about that, the idea of integrity and the idea, when you couple that with courageous authenticity, you're accountable to yourself and you're accountable to everyone when both those things hold true. And so it's one thing to say that integrity is important. It's another thing to live and breathe it in every moment. And so to your point about being the same person as a parent and being the same person in a conversation now, the same person in the boardroom, the same person on the shop floor, so to speak, you will be tested in those moments if you express through courageous authenticity, this is who I am and this is what I stand for, and then don't live up to those expectations in those moments. I'm interested to know, has your strong values and that commitment to authenticity, has that ever been a problem? Has it created risk? Or has it always been a benefit? Has there always been upside to that?
For sure, it's created risk. Walking away from positions when you've still got mortgages to pay and kids to feed. I could have probably had other positions and other roles if I'd have drank the same Kool-Aid. But I can't do that. It's not because I want to be awkward or obstructive or go against the grain. I've got to be able to go to bed at night and sleep soundly that I've done the right thing. And even though I probably have hurt myself along the way, actually, by not following the crowd and being the political player, but I can still sleep at night. And that's really important to me. And look in the mirror. I can look in the mirror and know that I did the right thing. It may not have brought me the most money or the most success, but in my heart, I know it's the right thing. And it's really important to me.
So you did a post recently and you talked about where you were and where you're heading in the future. And given everything that you've just said, what struck me through the feedback and the comments from people responding to your post was the belief that they had in you and the belief that they had in you being who you are. And so it's funny, having done that research and then hearing you talk about the importance of integrity, you can tell me whatever you like. What I find interesting is when other people sitting out there in the publicly available World Wide Web, when they reinforce that, it shows that your words and actions have followed through. One has followed the other. There is consistency. There is a pattern of behavior there. So I want to flip that around and I want to ask you, when has that authenticity provided upside? What are the good things in your experience as a leader that have come from being courageously authentic?
I'll tell you the good things as a leader is exactly as you just said. I can think I'm doing the right thing. But when the people you lead tell you and they give you, or even better, tell others, that's even better. So I've had messages recently like, I can't believe you've said this or you've done that in the good way. And I said, yeah, but I'm just being truthful. And they're like, yeah, but I could never do that. I'm like, why couldn't you do that? That I find really reassuring as a leader. And I've had many, many messages of late, personal messages to me from people like, I love the fact you're so authentic. I love the fact you're so curious. I love the fact, the things that I've done and my actions have had the impact it's had on other people. That makes me really proud, actually. And it shows me I'm doing the right thing.
Are there any specific examples that come to mind from your leadership journey recently where people have given you that feedback and said, that is quintessentially Ali? Like, I know that's you. Or that is, the phrase that I like to use, it's a calling card. It's something that they identify with your leadership. Does anything come to mind that you could share?
So one thing I've done since I came to Australia, so for the past 7 years on my leadership journey, and I've worked for 3 organisations in that time. And every time I've given all the employees a copy of a book by Dr. Seuss called Other Places You'll Go. And in my last role, I went to the kickoff meeting and there was 275 people and I wrote in each book like a couple of paragraphs to each person explaining why I think that book's really important and the difference a growth mindset would make. And that was my takeaway. And turning up every day and doing your job because you're doing it from the heart, not just to get a paycheck, doing it because you care. And the amount of feedback I have had about that book. And when I meet new employees, I would talk about, I'd give them a copy of the book. I'd talk about the book and I'd read a passage of the book to them, which sounds a bit weird, but I meant it with the best of intention. And I'd say, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. When I read that to the new employee or the organization, I emphasize the word you. So you can show up however you choose and you see yourself. It's up to you. You're going to get your salary as long as you show up and do your job. But if you make the difference, then everything's so much better. You're engaged. The job you're doing is better. It's a win-win for everybody. And then at the end of the book, it says, and will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. And I think that's like the icing on the cake by doing the right thing and having the growth mindset. And I speak about that to many people. And so many people have come back to me with cards, messages. Now, I'm not the author. I've just found this book and thought it was amazing. Actually, I'll give credit where credit's due. It was a guy called Simon Rowntree who used to head up Camp Quality, the charity. And when I first came to Australia, we had a broken culture in the organisation. And I met with him and I asked his advice and he came to speak to my organisation. And he used to do that for all of his team members. And so it was his idea and I took his idea, stole it with pride, with his permission. And now I utilise it all the time. And the amount of cards, messages. People have bought me books back, actually, other books that they love back. I've had that as well. And even better, the spouses of the employee have wrote to me and said, thank you so much. Because of that book, I've quit my job. I've got a new career. One guy wrote to me in my last organization and he said, Ali, the book you gave me, he said, I've kept it to one side. My daughter is about to go traveling by herself for the first time. He said, and I think she has autism or something. He said, and they sat down one day having breakfast and he read the book to her. He said, and it brought us so close as a dad and daughter. I've got all goosebumpy now. And he said it changed everything between our relationship and between us. And so I think to myself, again, I'm not the author of the book, but the fact that I brought that book into their life and I explained why I think it's really important. And again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm putting it's on you. The brains are in your head, the feet are in your shoes. I think that for me is being authentic and being a true leader. I'm not sitting there saying, who's your top customer? What's your KPIs? How many calls are you doing? That's just the job. But showing you that I'm a human and we have a relationship here, that has given me the most beautiful feedback as well.
So I know that book very well. As soon as you mentioned it and as soon as you referenced that quote, I remember it very well too. It's something that I used to read to our kids growing up and something that I actually wrote in my daughter's birthday card when she was younger. So I know that connection with the intent to, I think, help them to believe bigger. And so I keep coming back to that idea of belief in what you're saying, empowering people to believe in themselves in the same way that it sounds like you were at one stage believed in by others and that helped you get to where you needed to be. Your story is unique and the things that you have done are unique. Whether Simon was the inspiration or not, that's a calling card for you. You and I both know that there are plenty of wonderful leaders who work in this sector and in other sectors who have that same sense of empathy and authenticity. But I would argue that it is not the default for a lot of leaders, even though, as you say, leadership has changed. Where is this reluctance towards authenticity coming from, in your opinion?
I think it's because, like I said before, about the colleagues who were all high and mighty at work and then little mice when they went home, by their own admission. I think people think they should be like what a leader is. A leader should have a very polished suit and a tie, or if they work in tech, they should wear some trainers and a t-shirt. I think people have an image, maybe social media fuels that massively. They see images, they see what Steve Jobs looked like or what Elon Musk looks like or whoever it is they happen to admire, and they want to be them. And that's why I think, and Steve Jobs, by all accounts, was a bit of a bully. He wasn't the nicest person. He was a very smart guy, but by people who've worked with him, any books you may read, don't speak highly of him at all in his leadership style. He was very successful though. So what are you after as a leader? Are you after that, high echelons of success? Or do you want to be a nice person and sleep well at night? What do you want? I'm sure Steve Jobs slept very well at night as well. So I think it's that. I think people assume when you're the leader, you're the president or you're whatever job you've got, you know everything. You must know everything. But you don't. You're just a person like you and I. And we're doing our best. We get up every day and we do our best. But people, I'm assuming, may need role models. And so then they look on the paper or the books or they read, they get a biography for Christmas and read that and then try and emulate some of that. I don't know because it's not me. But I'm assuming that's why they act the way they do. And that's why leaders don't change. And the guy I met at the weekend, the guy who used to be a leader and failed at it, and he said to me, you're the only leader I've known who is truly authentic. Now, he used to work with me. He wasn't my direct report. He was a few rungs down the ladder. But he said, I've never met a leader before. Like, isn't that a shame? This guy, I'm guessing, I don't know how old he is, I'm guessing late 30s. He's never met a leader who's truly authentic. That's quite shocking, don't you think?
I think it is. And I think what worries me, the comment you made there about the different characters that we uphold as successful leaders because of success. And what does success look like is absolutely open to interpretation. So perhaps what people are being told success looks like.
Yeah.
The metaphor you used earlier, the idea of a leader being a diamond versus polishing diamonds, I think there's a really important distinction there. Do you see yourself as the prize, the crown jewel? Do you see yourself as enabling others is a very big distinction.
Yeah.
But there's also something in what you were describing there. I think people also don't believe these things can coexist. I think that people feel that to be a good leader, to be a successful leader, I need to have a certain level of, not inauthenticity at all, but certainly a degree of control, and certainly a degree of guard or veil or mask, as it's been referred to on this podcast before, wearing a mask. And I think what I'm hearing from you, and certainly the view that I hold, is that being human and being professional aren't two different things.
No.
Yet I still believe that, and the line you mentioned before about people looking to social media and seeing examples of others that might inspire them to act and behave a certain way. What a wonderful global infrastructure for good, authentic, well-meaning leaders who do empower others to tap into that network and to share a better example. So why aren't we seeing more examples of the right, good, empowering kind of leadership? Why do we see people who continue to polish their own diamonds rather than looking for others?
I don't know. I don't know the answer because I don't understand it, if I'm honest, because I'm not that. In my last role, I took some new starters out for lunch. And one guy said to me afterwards, actually, my credit card didn't work, so he had to pay the bill. Now, we reimbursed him. Everything was fine. But, there's another thing about being totally human and unauthentic. I'm like, oh, my God, I didn't bring my own purse and my company credit card doesn't work. And he got the check. And walking back to the office, he said to me, you know what, Ali, I've been in the industry, not that company, but I've been in the industry for 25 years. He said, and never, ever has the company leader taken me for a lunch, ever. And the other thing that I do, which sounds maybe silly, but for me it's important, is send everybody a birthday card. I handwrite the birthday cards myself. I get a list of the birthdays for that month. I sit and I write a message to them, and I, where possible, hand deliver it to them. And I do it because a lot of people, actually, the guy who, I do it for two reasons. The first, the guy who gave me the position and believed in me way back when, he used to do it. Now, he's a Dutch guy. Maybe it was a Dutch thing. When he came to the company, he wrote you a birthday card and he'd buy the girls a plant, like a nice flower, and the guys a bottle of wine. That's what he used to do. And I loved that. And I also do it because people feel valued. And people are like, wow, you've thought of me? No. And we're not writing, happy 50th or anything. We're not exposing anything private. And it's not even a big hoo-ha. It's just a discreet card. And people love that. And I've had, when I left some of my organizations, so many letters written to me going, the fact you thought of the little things, the little details like my birthday, and you gave me a card and I shared it with my family. And, that means a lot to people because often their leader doesn't do that. Or the leader of not just their leader, but the leader of the organization doesn't do that. These things cost $5 or whatever, like $10 for a card. It's next to nothing. It cost me 2 seconds of my time to write, thank you for all you do every day. Wishing you a great birthday, love, Ali. It takes seconds to write that. And for that person, it means so much. So why other people don't do that, I don't know. It's funny you say that, though, because I would argue that the greatest gift, and whether, again, these threads of professional lives and parenting family lives keep intertwining in this conversation, but the greatest gift you can give is time. And I think time with intent. Yeah.
And so those examples of the card or the book and sharing that with, several hundred colleagues, that is your time. And it's a conscious choice to spend your time doing that versus doing something else. And so this is perhaps where, and if people listening are thinking, yeah, I can't do what Ali's doing because I don't have the time to sit down and handwrite 275 messages in the pages of a Dr. Seuss book. If that's what they're thinking, this is where I want to bring in this idea of how your leadership plays out in a scalable digital environment, because it's not a panacea, but it does offer an awful lot of solutions to the time constraints that we have in the physical world. There are only so many colleagues you can take out for lunch. Yeah. That's just a reality.
Yeah.
Yet the impact that you can have in an environment that is scalable and searchable, often to people you don't even know are looking. And that would be an interesting reflection too, Ali, is whether you've got feedback from people you didn't know were watching your behaviours and being inspired by them, spouses who are reading cards and leaving their job as an example and going on to do greater things. How does your leadership then transfer into an online environment, and does any of the things that we've talked about up to this point change when you're sitting behind a keyboard versus meeting someone face to face?
I recently I was interviewed by the AFR. Can I talk about another podcast quickly?
Of course, yeah. Cross-promotion.
Thank you. I was interviewed by the AFR on 15 Minutes with the Boss. Now, I'd heard of it just prior to going on that, but before that, I'd never heard of it. I was inundated by people I'd never even met, all over LinkedIn, privately messaging me saying, "You've made my commute to work so brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing." And I didn't know them. I've never met them. I probably will never meet them. But you inspire people along the way through a podcast, a 15-minute podcast that they downloaded on their commute. So how cool is that? I just think, if one little nugget of what I've shared helps them or changes their life or helps them find a new job or whatever it may be a better parent or whatever, then that's the impact you have. And it's all about impact. I work in healthcare to make an impact on people.
I'm getting this sense of a flow or a formula almost, which I think I want to reflect on because it feels a bit counterintuitive. You mentioned the idea of authenticity that then, as you're describing there, creates a level of connection that I believe leads to that trust and belief that then creates, whether it's an individual performance gain, i.e. I see the world differently and I'm happy to go and tackle things I wouldn't have before, or if it's an enterprise, an institutional one, collectively we achieve greater things.
Yeah.
That authenticity to connection, to belief, to performance, that flow for me feels very different to the way that most people would operate, particularly in a digital environment where you see things and you read words that arguably just feel much more scripted and contrived, not necessarily disingenuous, but just more, it's generic. There's a belief that we just go through the motions online and we might be a wonderful person behind closed doors and we might, a bit like that distinction between family life and in the boardroom, we might be a certain thing in the physical world and a different thing in the digital world. I'm interested to know, how can you express who you are through your words, through a screen? How have you learned to do that with confidence and with clarity and with consistency over time?
I don't know if I've learned to do it. I've just done it. When I came to Australia, that's probably when I was doing more posting and things online than before. And I was the managing director of Roche. And I said to my team, I want us to become a household name because I'm really, really proud of what we do and what I did when I was in that role and what the company do. We give people answers. Now, we're not allowed to advertise. It's really, really restricted in this country. Probably worse. The US, there's an advert on healthcare every 2 seconds. We can't say and do very, very little we're allowed. And so I was like, how do we get our name out there? And then luckily or unluckily, and I didn't plan this, it just kind of happened, was COVID. And so during COVID, we were the first company in Australia to have a COVID test. And my phone rang off that hook, morning, noon and night. I had every media outlet. I had every laboratory leader. I had the government. I spoke to the health minister and his team every single day for 2 years. It was full on. And so before very long, maybe not our company, but what we did became a household name. PCR testing, everyone in the world knew what a PCR test was. No one could probably spell PCR testing prior, right? So it became a thing. And I think it's about, there's a saying, don't waste a good crisis. And I'm not belittling what happened. People lost their lives. It was terrible. It was hard work for so many people. But how do we utilize that for the greater good? How do we educate people on the importance of testing and what we do as an organization and what we offer? And that's what I really tried to do. And I had 1,400 media interactions, be it TV, radio, newspaper, to talk about the good that we were trying to do. We were trying to bring rapid antigen testing to Australia. We kept getting pushback. Eventually we got it in. And that changed our lives. Actually, it opened up our country again. If you remember the construction industry down tools and they weren't allowed to do anything, it was costing millions per day. I think even maybe billions. And so we had to open up. And so common sense prevailed in the end. But while I can't advertise the company I work for when I work in pharmaceuticals or diagnostics, I can do my best to put it out there in the way I did. The other thing I did, certainly in my Roche days, was we did a lot of work with charities. And so I would repost the charity things. I would say how we'd raise money for certain children's walks or Children's Heart Federation, things like that. So alerting the public or my followers, and then the people who follow the charities to what is happening in the world. In health, if you have a disease or your family member has a disease, you know everything about it. You're the expert on it. But if it's not affecting your life, you probably, everyone knows what a common cold is, and everyone's heard of cancer. They probably don't really know what it's all about, but you find a lump or something a bit weird and you get it checked out. But when you've got it, or one of your family members have got it, you are like a doctor. You know everything. You Google and chat GPT and everything. And so it's around how we raised awareness, and that's what I tried to do with the best I could in the laws that we have, the really restrictive laws, is raise awareness. And even just like, probably the one I'm most proud of is cervical cancer. Australia is set to be the first country in the world to eliminate cervical cancer in line with the WHO guidelines, the World Health Organization guidelines. That's remarkable. And yes, we have a vaccine and all the kids are getting vaccinated now, but we also have to have screening. And that's where we came into it, and other companies as well. It wasn't just the company I work for. And to advertise, and we put an advert on the back of toilet doors in shopping malls. We weren't advertising our product. We were just like, when did you last have a cervical cancer screen? If you've not had one in the last 5 years, go and see your GP. So we weren't saying it must be ours, just raising awareness. And that I think is really important, raising awareness. And we should all do it, not just people who work for the companies, but those whose families are affected and those who are aware of it, and use your online presence for good. Because online presence can have a lot of bad. We see that with the kids now not being able to use various platforms and things, but it can also do a lot of good.
I'm sensing that idea and that drive of awareness. And I think that's, I would argue, probably the most common use case that leaders would have today to raise awareness of my cause, my issues, my agenda, whatever it might be. But I think in your case, Ali, where I would perhaps give you feedback and also reflect the feedback that others have given you, if your online presence was simply about you saying what mattered to you and you talking about the causes that were important to you, without then following up and listening to people's questions, answering them, encouraging them in terms of what their stories or their priorities and their agendas were, then it would be inauthentic. And that integrity that you hold offline wouldn't then translate online. And so as much as awareness might be the starting point, we need to get out there and tell our stories in a constrained media environment or otherwise, governance, compliance, regulation around what we can say and do. The reality is that as a leader, if that was all you did, I think people would stop listening fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so being who you are in all environments is important. And I therefore feel that, and I can see this through the way that you interact with people online, there is an absolute parallel between the conversation we're having and the conversation you would have in the comments, for example, under someone else's post. So I think that's an important call out, is just to explain the balance there. So for other leaders who might feel stuck, who might feel constrained, who might feel the same regulatory pressures, we've got to be really careful about what we say. What do they stand to gain by not necessarily, well, definitely not breaching any regulatory guidelines and requirements? What do they stand to gain by simply being themselves online and having access to those scale and amplification benefits?
When I joined my last organisation, I said this, but I'm going to say now, I said it to the whole organisation because I really believe it. You're in your role because of who you are, the skills you have, the attributes you bring, the good, the bad and the ugly. And I'm in my role for the same reason, but they're very different skills and attributes, and what I bring is different to what you bring. And so don't pretend to be me, and I won't pretend to be you, because then that's not authentic and that's not real. People don't want Ali to be Rog, and they don't want Rog to be Ali. They want you to be you and me to be me. So why do we all keep pretending to be somebody we're not? And actually what you've got and what I've got and what we all bring something different. We all bring our own way of thinking, our own experiences. I said earlier, experience comes one day at a time. When you're 20, you've got a very different experience to when you're 50, because you've had another 30 years of life, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And so if you bring that, you're going to bring a very different mindset, a very different way of looking at things. Not the right way, but your way. And then if you team that with, I'm nearly 50, team that with someone who's 20, and they're going to bring their way of, like, I speak to my kids, and they see things very differently to how I see things. But that's the magic. If my kids were trying to be me and I was trying to be them, we're all getting lost, not knowing where we're coming or going. Whereas I think if we all show up with who we really are and what we really think and being true to ourselves, you don't spend any energy on pretending, because that must be a real waste of energy. I don't know how people do that, because you're true. And you're bringing life experience, and you might drop the odd F-bomb or whatever you might do, but that's normal, that's human. Whether you say the wrong thing at the wrong time or put your size 9s in it, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to do that. That's just human, but more times than not, you'll do a good thing. It'll be a good thing that will come of you being yourself and me being myself and not trying to pretend to be somebody we're not.
And you know what I love about that? It sounds so simple. We should all just be ourselves.
Yeah.
We should all just feel comfortable being ourselves rather than trying to be something else. And I think if we step right back for a moment and just talk about the commercial angle on this and the commercial landscape, ultimately what we're all looking to do is to build trust with the people who matter most to us. Yeah. And with that trust, move forward together on that mission, on that journey. Without that trust, it can't work. With everyone turning up as someone else, it can't work. And so if people did feel comfortable and did feel confident turning up as themselves, not just in the workplace, and hopefully they do, in the physical environment, but online as well, the compounding effect of that is just unimaginable. As you say, you are going to resonate differently with people, as I will resonate differently with people, and that's okay. We're not all going to resonate with everyone.
Yeah.
It is much more efficient and much more believable to simply be ourselves. We will resonate with the people who resonate with us, where there is a connection. And if we all feel empowered to do that, the benefits are going to scale rapidly. And that's the commercial payoff here, which I'm hearing through that authenticity thread. But I think there is one more important call out. That whole system exists on the premise of the leader setting the example. Because I'm certain that workforces will not put their neck out if someone above them does not. If they see someone wearing a mask, they apply the mask.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is me kind of philosophizing on your first point about people looking into social media and seeing the wrong kind of leadership. Maybe that's where we are. And maybe actually what we need to see is leaders who are willing to be authentic, to be vulnerable, not gushy, but vulnerable and saying, I don't have all the answers. And this is how I am turning up today. And I encourage you to do the same. And in people turning up as their authentic selves.
Absolutely. And if you're your authentic self, or if you've got empathy, or you've got some of those traits that we've spoken of, doesn't mean you're not a great business person. Doesn't mean you don't deliver great results. When I left Roche, we were growing 3 times the market. Now, it wasn't just me, I had a huge team as well, but together we were growing 3 times the market. That's phenomenal and a huge change to where we were when I walked into the job 5 years earlier, and through a COVID pandemic as well in the middle. And so I was still myself. I was still the human. I tried my best to be the human who I am today. And I'm sure I got things wrong along the way as well, but we were successful. We were super successful. And so it shouldn't be seen as a weakness. And, I've sat around many board tables. There's loads of egos. Egos are everywhere. But I think that should stop. That's the issue. Having to have the last word, having to say the thing, and you hear it a lot of times. A woman will say something and then a man will say something, people listen to the man. I've seen that happen. I'm not against men or anything like that. I don't like them discussions. I just think we all should come and be ourselves, doesn't matter what gender you are. But the ego piece is what gets in the way when it's about being yourself.
So I'm hearing then a very clear, this is almost a commercial and decision maker argument. Being yourself and being authentic is no longer a nice to have. This is about commercial growth. This is about realizing your potential. This is about having people join you on that mission, whatever that agenda and that direction is that you set strategically as a leader of an organization, as a board, endorsing that and supporting that. What do you say then to the boards who are looking at this as either a bit of fun and games, or looking at it as something where we need to be scripted and managed and controlled and not ourselves? what call to action do you have for them or to executives who feel like they are stuck in that same position?
I'd say, look in the mirror and ask yourself, is this how you want to be managed? Do you want to be managed by somebody with a huge ego, who's not authentic, who doesn't show empathy, and all the other traits that may or not be present? Because I don't. I want to be managed by someone who believes in me, who shows me things I didn't think possible, who is a human being, who sometimes screws it up and shows it's all right to screw it up, within reason, of course, being compliant and all the things we spoke of earlier. If they show that they're not a robot and they're not superhuman, and it's okay to have an off day, and it's okay to not always be polished, then it gives you license to do that as well. And I think when you see the person for who the person is, you want to work for them. You want to give to them. You're engaged to help with the cause. You get the reason why they are the way they are, and you want to be part of that tribe. I think that's really important. If you've got someone, maybe you admire the person who's like a 1980s football manager, quite strict, and maybe that's what you admire, and that is what does it for you. And great, go for your life, go and work for them people. But it's not what does it for me. If I have someone who's human, I respect them, they're knowledgeable, they're successful, you can still be all them things and be yourself as well.
Very encouraging words. And it's quite a nice full circle moment as I look at it. And I didn't know you were going to share that quote from Dr. Seuss earlier, but I mentioned that post you made recently, and I mentioned some of the wonderful comments that came back and the validation and the reinforcement of your leadership style. There is no greater proof point than the fact that one of the quotes that I read in those comments says, "You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know, and you are the one who will decide where to go." And I think that for me is the evidence. So if you lead a certain way, and if that is authentic to who you are, and you can sit here and tell me that without any pre-planning, you can tell me that, and that I can look at my notes and see that that is the closing quote from someone who you've clearly had an impact on yourself, then that for me is the calling card. And that for me is the example of where leadership can scale far beyond and deliver commercial benefits far beyond any kind of command and control can. And so, Ali, I look forward to seeing where you go next, whatever that place is.
Yes.
But I'm very thankful that you shared your story, and I really hope that people listening today have been hugely encouraged and empowered by not only the example you set, but by the encouragement that you've given them. So thank you for sharing that on the Your Digital Reputation podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for listening. If you've learned something from today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. For all show notes, head to propelgroup.com.au. Thanks again for listening.